We're in part 3 of the current series, Too Good to Miss, 3 things you can't afford to miss and how to ensure that you won't. And here's the premise of the series real quick. And I'd love if you can go back and listen or watch if you missed any of the first 2 parts. But there's certain parts of life that are just too good to miss. And it doesn't mean there's not difficult stuff. There is. In fact, you got to embrace the difficult to enjoy what's good. That's another message. But there's stuff that you don't want to miss. And in fact, we all have the story of missing something consequential and not being able to go back and get it. And one of the things that we want in life, and really that Jesus invites us into, is have as much unnecessary regret as possible. And so in week 1, we started with the how to ensure you won't part, basically 3 things. That one of the ways that we miss out a lot of times in certain areas and things in life, even seasons of life, is when we are distracted, we're deceived, and we're disobedient. The first one, deceived, when we deceive ourselves into really bad decisions we would never try to sell anybody else on. We've all been guilty. The second way is when we're distracted. We prioritize immediate, like what I want in the moment, something to just get a dopamine hit, temporary happiness, cure the boredom, whatever it is. May not even be immoral, but where we just prioritize what we want immediately rather than what we want ultimately, and we end up undermining our values ultimately. And the very thing that we decide in order to not miss out becomes the reason that we're missing out. And then the third thing is disobedient, which might feel a little old school to some of you, but specifically if you're a follower of Jesus. I say this every week. If you haven't signed on to follow Jesus, you're not accountable to the Jesus thing. And my hope is at some point you realize that Jesus is who he says he is, and maybe you'd begin to follow him. But if you're a Jesus follower, this is about the teachings of Jesus, the way of Jesus. And one of the things that's true for a lot of us is if we had been following Jesus in the season of our greatest regret, we might have avoided our greatest regret. So that was week 1. And then last week, week 2, we started to look at the first of 3 things we can't miss. The first one was don't miss Jesus, which you're like, could that be any more obvious? Of course, the preacher starts with don't miss Jesus. But seriously, if you were not here, we got so much feedback from last week because there are so many ways in which people, maybe online, this is your story, miss or dismiss Jesus unnecessarily. This wasn't about church or religion or a religious system, but about the person of Jesus. And then that brings us today in the second thing of the 3 things we can't afford to miss. And before I dive into this, here's my disclaimer. I do not know your story. In fact, I will upfront, and I feel like I've heard just about every story imaginable doing what I do for so many years. I don't know your story. I don't know the complexities of your story. I don't know all of the layers. And I am not unaware of the complexities of the topic that I'm about to talk about. So if we're halfway through, which I know happens often, and you're arguing with me in your mind, and you're going through all these things, and you're like, he doesn't understand, he doesn't know my story. I'm telling you now, I don't know your story. And I understand how complex it is. But the second of the 3 things that we can't afford to miss is family. Now, for some of you, just the topic is not emotionally neutral, right? Meaning it evokes big feelings one side or the other, positively or negatively, depending on your family of origin, your background, what you're going through right now. I mean, sometimes it depends on when you ask us about family, how we feel about family. But it's just, there's a lot of emotion, even the terms. Father, mother, son, daughter, husband, wife. I mean, there is so much emotion in that. So it is not an emotionally neutral topic, and I'm well aware of that. And I don't know your story. Did I say that already? So I get it. So let me just but here's the thing. When you talk about this, there is a massive elephant in the room. So I want to deal with the elephant in the room. I want to acknowledge this. I want to face it down. I want to get this out of the way first, because I just don't think you'll hear anything else that I say until we acknowledge it. And the elephant in the room is, no one you're related to is as smart as you. I mean, that's just true. Like, you don't know how you got, I ask myself this all, you don't know how you got all the common sense, but you did. Things just leaned in your direction. And you're not perfect, but you're way more perfect than everybody else in your family. You're closer. And you just think, I mean, sometimes you think it in the middle of an argument, but you don't want it to come out. If everybody would just take their cue from me, if everybody in my family would listen to me, my family would be way better off. Their lives would be better if they would listen to my wisdom and my knowledge. So I just want to acknowledge what you feel. No eye contact or elbows. You're the smartest person in your family. And I get it, and it's tough. And you could solve a lot if people would just listen to you. So with that out of the way real quick, moving on to the actual message. For some of you, you're in a place where you still have the opportunity or you are experiencing at some level what people would identify as the ideal family situation. Not perfect. In fact, if you came to church and you're looking around and people just look too good to me, and everybody, their marriage is great, it's a lie. It's not that great, okay? And I'm not saying everybody's a wreck. I'm just saying it is never as good as you think it is. Some of you grew up in church environments where they just looked the part, and they had a big Bible, and everybody was smiling on Sundays, and they had stick figures bound down to a cross in the back of the minivan, and you're like, they've got it all together. It's never that good. All of us have got stuff, so we should just realize that as well. But I'm just talking about ideal in terms of not perfect, but kind of one of those things, to use the marriage example, where maybe you're married and there's kind of an opportunity for death do us part, a marriage that survives and stays intact and is even good, but not perfect, because perfect is not possible this side of heaven. Or, kids that end up, if they get married, stay married. And the thing that I kind of want to surface this tension, the thing that is worth aiming for and fighting for and even praying for, dreaming for, is the ideal. That to let go of that actually would be to lose something. And so that ideal is a good thing. But then others of you would say, and this is a lot of us and a lot of you online, my life is looking a little bit more real than it is ideal. Just the reality of where I find myself. And maybe some of it's a little bit your fault. Maybe it's somebody else's fault. Maybe it's entirely somebody else's fault. Maybe it's not, there's some complex situation. It's nobody's fault. Like life just happened, and because of some things, the events outside of your control or their control, you just find yourself in a very difficult situation. And at some level, you would look at maybe what in a previous season you aimed for, and you fought for, and you prayed for, and you even dreamed for. And you recognize that maybe it's not going to look exactly like that. It's not, that dream isn't going to fully come to fruition. Now, I don't know if this helps you at all, so just hang with me or not, but for a couple of you, maybe it will. There are almost no good examples of family in the scriptures. Almost none. You've heard me talk about this before, but maybe this will help you. You go all the way back to the very first family. Do you know what they did? Their, claim to fame. They introduced sin into the world. Not a good start. Like, hey, what'd you contribute? We jacked the entire world up with sin. That's the first ever family. And then you got the first son, who is murdered by his brother. By the way, just side note, one of the things in our family with our 4 kids we'll emphasize a lot is, hey, your siblings have the chance to be your best friends for life. Your siblings have the chance to be the best friends for life. We really wanted to emphasize that in our family. So one day I was saying this, as I often do, and we try to just remind our kids and set them up for that in terms of their relationships. My maybe 4-year-old son, this is a little window on what it's like to be a pastor's kid. My 4-year-old son is like, I was like, siblings have the chance to be best friends for life. My little 4-year-old boy's like, or we could be Cain and Abel. And I was like, well, we could. And then he's like, at least I knew the story. I'm like, yeah, congratulations, buddy, you knew the story. He's like, maybe all 4. So they could be Cain and Abel, but that's how the first son gets. And then you go on to Abraham. God comes, this guy by the name of Abraham is like, hey, I'm making you a promise through you. I'm going to produce a family, build a nation. Extraordinary story. Do you know the story of Abraham? The guy that we elevate with great faith, and yes, he has an incredible story. He's in what many refer to as Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith. Abraham is before Pharaoh with his wife Sarah, and recognizes that Pharaoh wants to take his wife as part of his concubine collection, his collection of his harem. And literally Abraham says to Pharaoh, "That's fine. She's my sister." In order to protect himself, and offers his wife up, Sarah, as his sister. So that didn't go well. You look at all of the other Old Testament heroes, all of them had favorite wives. That's not good. Then you go to Joseph. We looked at him this summer. He gets sold into slavery by his brother because also he was the favorite son of his father's favorite wife. And it just goes on. And you want some more examples? I want David, one more. David, that maybe you know of King David, even if you didn't grow up in the church. King David was unfaithful as a husband, and even by ancient standards, which were different, even by ancient standards, he was a horrible father. So all of that to say, if you're in a place where you're like, I just struggle because my family is so dysfunctional, congratulations, you have a biblical family. In fact, some of you grew up with that, and you've heard me talk about this language before. They're like, you need to have a biblical family. Lo and behold, you have one. That's what a biblical family is. And then Jesus steps into all of that. Like Jesus steps into all of that dysfunction, all of the, can't even barely find a good example in the scriptures, specifically the Old Testament Jewish scriptures. And Jesus steps into that culture. And as you've heard me say, introduces a countercultural, paradigm shifting, upside down, the world had never seen it before way of life. For how to live life and to do family and marriage and all of the rest. He elevates the status and the worth of women in a culture where they had none. That came from Jesus. He gives value to children who had no value in that culture. He elevates the standards for not just husbands, but men in that culture that had virtually no standards in the first century. He teaches about forgive regardless. He goes so far as to just reorient how we relate to God to say, hey, you can't be right with God if you mistreat the people that God loves. That over and over again, what you will find in Jesus' teaching is that Jesus elevated and pointed toward the ideal, but he never failed to embrace the real. He never failed to embrace what was reality and what real life circumstances were about, and the fact that sometimes people have limited options and it's difficult, and they're coming from different places, different family of origins, had different things done to them, and Jesus factored all of that in. In fact, Jesus over and over again would point toward ideal, and he would embrace real, but even in pointing toward ideal, he was never idealistic. In fact, you'll find, follow Jesus throughout the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He had his harshest criticism over and over again for religious leaders who elevated an idealistic standard where they also added a bunch of stuff to it, an idealistic standard they knew they could not live up to, and then they superimposed it on other people knowing that they couldn't live up to it. And they never factored anybody's story into account, which is not the way of Jesus. In fact, over and over again, Jesus would factor people's story in. And just to acknowledge, this is why every single individual is coming from a different starting gate. They've had different things happen, completely different family of origin, completely different wiring. It's why it is so insane for church people to judge anybody else's progress because you have no idea of their story. And Jesus always factored other people's story into it. Even from my standpoint, sometimes I know more of people's stories than others do. And I look at people that others would just kind of bypass. And then I look at their life and knowing where they've come from. And I go, the progress that you have made, what has happened in your life is nothing short of extraordinary. Because we all have a different starting place. Jesus understood that. And so over and over again, he'd point toward the ideal, but he would fully embrace the real and the real lives that people were leading. In fact, John would come along, and John knew Jesus really well. If you know any of the Gospels, I mean, he was with Jesus for years. He gets toward the later part of his life, and John's trying to articulate and dictate what Jesus was really about. And he sits down to write it, and he goes, okay, the only way I could fully describe Jesus, and he uses these two words, he was full of grace and he was full of truth. Meaning, people love to be the balance of, churches love to be the balance of grace and truth, not Jesus. Jesus was full on grace and full on truth all the time, meaning he never dumbed down the truth and he never, ever, ever leveled down the grace. It was all grace. It's why his invitation is so extraordinary when he says, I want you to follow me. Meaning wherever you are, whatever your starting point is, because we all have a different starting point, there is a next step for you to take, and there is a way forward. In fact, this is why this is a lesson for us. It's why we should accept what is real and celebrate the ideal. Meaning we should accept what is real in our life, our circumstances. We should accept what's real in other people's circumstances so that we don't judge. But then we should be willing to still celebrate what is ideal. I mean, isn't it true even for some of us, if we haven't gotten to that place or things are not exactly the way we'd want them to at this season of our life, that we are praying for the ideal for our kids? That even maybe if it's not available to us, we're praying for it for somebody else. This is why we need to hang on or accept the real, next slide, and celebrate the ideal. And one of the things that I would say is, and this is just human nature, it is so easy to kind of disparage the ideal when we don't feel like we can live up to it. It's so easy to look at and what we aimed for and fought for, maybe prayed for, dreamed for, it's not looking exactly the way we think or thought it would. And it's so easy to think that maybe that dream was never legit in the first place. It's so easy to lower the expectations. And yet that would be a mistake, because we need to push toward the ideal. We need to point other people toward the ideal, but never let go of real, because Jesus never judged anybody for the real. He met them in that place. In fact, the most extraordinary example of it, I think, is in John chapter 8. And we looked at it just briefly in week 1, but I just want to touch on it again real quick, because Jesus is at the Temple Mount steps. And by the way, this is maybe a few hundred yards away from what they deemed the holiest place in all the earth, where this is where they would sacrifice to God. They felt like it was the presence of God, and there Jesus is. And these, what I would describe as voyeuristic peeping Toms, drag this lady who has been caught in adultery, and she had to be caught according to their law. And they're there to trap Jesus. Now, by the way, you notice they didn't drag the guy, just the woman, which is exactly what part of what Jesus came to upend is their cultural misunderstandings and turn everything on its head. And they try to trap Jesus because they want to know how Jesus will respond to her sin according to their law. And there they are. This woman, by the way, most likely is going to have to leave the city because of the fact that it's spread. The word has spread so much. They've just used her as a pawn in their game to get Jesus. Her life and marriage is probably never going to be ideal. And there she is. And maybe you know the story. Jesus begins to write something on the dusty steps of the Temple Mount. And we don't know what he wrote. But based on what happens in a second, it could have been a lot of things. I mean, it could have been, takes one to no one. It could have been part of it. It could have been, he starts just naming specific sins with an arrow. It's like Frank. And then Frank sets down his rock. But because they were all there to stone this woman. And eventually, after Jesus is done with them, he's like, whoever's not sinned, cast the first stone. They drop their stones. They walk away. And it's just Jesus and this woman on the temple steps. And he looks at her and he says, if we can go back to that verse, way back to earlier in the message. Way back. Close your eyes just for a second, if you would not mind. So, are we good, or should I just forget the notes and just go? Okay. No, that's way at the end of the message. Don't, John. Okay, I'll let them figure out. I'm just gonna, eyes on me. Just forget the screen for just a second. Okay. Well, John 8:10. Just stay with me. This was going to be such a dramatic moment, and we lost it. Where Jesus, the woman, Temple Mount steps. Where are they? Has no one condemned you? Basically, has no one sentenced you to die? And she's like, no, nobody's here. And then you maybe know these words. He says to this woman, because it's just him and her left. Neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. And in this moment, here's my point. Full on grace. Because they're like, well, our law requires that, this woman, and they start to rehearse the law. And Jesus is like, I'm the lawgiver. I don't know if you know yet, but the one who is making the laws and will be the issuer of the laws has arrived in Jesus. Like you guys, your whole Old Testament law and commandments, that was a shadow. The shadow caster has arrived. And he's full on grace because he knows her story and he knows your story and he factors it in. But then he turns to her, not just full on grace, but full on truth, and says, go now and leave your life of sin. Or basically, hey, your sin almost got you killed. In fact, We misunderstand this a lot of times, but in the New Testament, it's so clear. Sin always kills something. Every time there's sin, there's a death of something. A reputation, a future, a dream, a childhood, a marriage, your own self-worth, a clear conscience. Anytime there's sin, there's a death of something. And so he says to her, listen, every time you sin, it kills something inside of you. And by the way, it is a kryptonite to relationships. And he's basically saying to her, listen, all right, see ya. He's saying to her, don't buy into, and I think he would say the same to some of you. Don't buy into the lie that it's too late. This is just who I am. It doesn't matter. Jesus would say to this woman, it does matter because you matter. And you're made in the image of God. And there is always a step to take. There is always a way forward. There is always a better way to live. And here's this woman who may have to leave the city. Here's this woman whose life and marriage may never be ideal. And yet Jesus points her toward the ideal. So all that to say, Peter and Paul, they come along later. And they basically try to apply and make really clear everything that Jesus said specifically for family, for life, for marriage, for relationships in general. And I'm telling you, they make two extraordinary statements that are so helpful if we're willing to ask one simple question. And the one simple question is, what's next for me? What's next for me? Meaning, everybody's starting from a different place. Everybody's got a different story, and you don't need to compare your story to anybody else's. Some have more ideal in this season. Others, real is overpowering ideal in a big way. But if you don't want to miss family as much as it is possible, you got to ask this question, especially as a follower of Jesus. What's next? And so here's the first big statement, if you're willing to ask that question of don't miss family. It's a verse that Paul writes that I think is not going to be on any screen. In Ephesians 5:21, he says this, submit to one another out of reverence for, anybody remember how that ends? For Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, which, real quick, this whole verse, this whole context is talking about mutual submission, which just means I'm going to put you first. Above me. I'm going to put your needs above my needs before it's just all about how can I get mine. I'm going to prioritize somebody else's best interest. Now, I promised myself I wouldn't get into a whole theological thing about this, but just real quick. One of the most misinterpreted passages in all of the New Testament, because the whole idea, and it's clear from this verse in Ephesians, the whole idea was about mutual submission. I submit to you, you submit to me. How can I put your good above mine? The whole meaning was not about placing yourself under somebody else's authority. Because he makes so clear this is mutual submission. Then he applies it to a husband and a wife in this context, but there's a much bigger context to go, hey, both of you submit to one another. And then he uses that same language with women, but then he changes the word because submit was already applied. It was mutual. It goes both ways. And instead he uses the word love with husbands. Do you know I use the word love with husbands? We miss this in Western culture because in first century culture, men viewed women as property, as a commodity. And so in this moment, this was so countercultural, it's hard for us to even understand. He was going, hey, both of you submit to one another. Oh, and by the way, husbands, I want you to actually love your wife rather than treat her like property. And all of the husbands in the first century are like, what? I'm telling you, it's hard. It was so countercultural. That was Jesus' point, that New Testament marriage is a submission competition. And if you get two people to do that, and again, not placing yourself under authority, it's about how can we both do that? How can we both get in line with that? You experience an extraordinary, not perfect, but extraordinary relationship. In fact, that even works in the workplace. That works in other facets of society and other facets of your relationships where when you get a couple people who are looking out for the best interest of the other person, and they do that mutually, suddenly you have extraordinary relationships. But in this context, I'm telling you, it was so radical because in that culture, men had 100% of the legal authority. And for them to do this, it was dangerous because culturally it was so disruptive. And Jesus came to disrupt culture. And this was a hallmark of the first century church. So all that to say, what does that look like in your context? What does that look like in your situation? To put the needs of somebody else, and maybe there's a specific somebody that comes to mind over your needs, to put somebody else first above you, which is so counterintuitive, isn't it? Like, what would that look like? And I know the response of most of us as human beings, we're like, they don't deserve it. Right. But it didn't say submit to one another out of reverence for them. See, in this moment, Jesus introduces not even the golden rule. The golden rule is do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Jesus introduces the platinum rule. I want you to do unto others as God has done for you in Jesus, which is a completely different standard, which is why New Testament, New Covenant, Jesus theology is terrifying, because the standard is so high and you almost always know what to do, and all of the rules and all the commandments just kind of fade away. And now it's, when I'm not sure what to say or do, what does love demand of you? What does love demand of me? And in this moment, he's raising the bar, that you submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, or literally your King. It is you do for undeserving others as your King has done to undeserving you. Then whatever your context, what does it look like to submit to one another out of reverence for your King, even when they don't deserve it? And then the second statement, if you're willing to ask what's next, is such a big one. Paul writes it to Roman Christians. It was not a happy time in Rome under Emperor Nero. There was a lot of dysfunction. There was a lot of uncertainty. And he writes regarding relationships, and he gives these very clarifying words. And he says, if it is possible, this is in Romans chapter 12, verse 18. If it is possible, he's talking about relationships. And by the way, with what I'm about to say, if it's possible means it's not always possible. And it's not always prudent, what he's about to say in regard to trying to heal relationships. Meaning, you do the work in you, but it is not always possible, prudent, wise to have a relationship or pursue a relationship with certain other people. In fact, it's very interesting. When Judas betrays Jesus, Jesus already knows Judas has made up his mind, and he doesn't pursue him. He lets him go. Like, there are some relationships you should never pursue. That there should always be a boundary. And that doesn't mean that you hold on to lack of forgiveness or bitterness. It just means it's not possible in that relationship. So Paul acknowledges that. If it's possible, and then he says this, as far as it depends on you, meaning in relationship, isn't it true? You don't hold all the cards. You can't control another person. You know that already. There is only so much you can do, which is his point. Make sure that you have done everything you can do. If it is possible, may not be wise. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, meaning do everything that you can do. Then he says this, live at peace with everyone. Here's the application. Do everything, if you're a Jesus follower. If you're not, you can pick and choose, but this will even benefit you if you're not a Jesus follower. If you're a Jesus follower and you are serving your King, a follower of Jesus, do everything within your power to remove every obstacle to peace, specifically in family relationships, knowing it's not always possible, but you got to do everything you can do, not because there's any guarantees. God in Jesus moved in our direction, moved in your direction, died for you, was for you, forgave you, and he had no idea whether you'd accept him or not. This is no guarantees. It's not about outcome. It's about obedience. This is about doing for undeserving others what God has done for you in Christ. This is about living out the life of Christ in your family relationships. So let me just ask you again, what does that look like in your context? If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, meaning you have to ask the question, have you done everything you can do? Have you done everything you can do? Have you done everything you can do? If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, remove every obstacle to peace, knowing it's not always possible for reconciliation. Sometimes it's not healthy. Sometimes it's not even advisable. But have you done all you can do? I mean, one of the things in our current cultural context, and I think there's several reasons for this, is I'm amazed at people's lack of ability to have direct conversations with other people who are flesh and blood. I do not get the ghosting culture and just break up and go away, quit a job, never have a conversation, never actually talk about that thing with that other person, even if it can never be restored. And come on, if we're honest, this is what Paul talks about later in Corinthians, it's acting like a child. And in our culture, there's this complete failure to kind of like just have an adult conversation with another person. And all Paul's saying is, before you walk away, because it may not be possible, be an adult, have an adult conversation, and do everything that you can with the possibility that maybe reconciliation should happen. But even if it doesn't, what if you made this the goal? What if you made the goal no regrets and a clear conscience? No regrets and a clear conscience. No regrets and a clear conscience. Here's the reality. Some of what trips us up is we are so focused on the outcomes. Does it work? Did I get them to apologize? Do they see it my way? Did I heal the relationship? Sometimes that's never going to happen. But we're so tied to outcomes where instead God would say, no. The pathway to a well-lived life and following the way of Jesus is you can't control anybody else. The win for you is not the outcome. It's no regret. It's a clear conscience. It's regardless of what happens, obedience is the reward. Moving in the direction to know that I've done everything that I can is the reward in terms of following Jesus. And at some level, I think there's blessing on the other side of that. And so what if the goal was no more regret, clear conscience, where you said, Heavenly Father, I've done everything I can do. And I'm surrendering that the outcome is in your hands. When you do everything you can do, in some cases, it will unlock something in somebody else that they don't know how to unlock on their own. And it was your initiation that created that process. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you got to do this. You're a follower of a king who moved in your direction, who gave up everything with no guarantees of what you were going to do. You got to do this for somebody else. And it may not be possible, but you got to do all that you can do. In some cases, initiate. And come on, for some of you, if I'm being real specific, you need to do it today. You're like, it's complicated. It is, and it isn't. For your sake, do everything that you can do. That's what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. That's what it looks like. Even if nothing happens, you go your way, they're never going to change. There's nothing you can do about it. But that's your way forward of no regret, clear conscience, and to make sure that you don't unnecessarily miss family. So, with all that said, back to the beginning and then lightning round, and we're going to be done. Don't miss family. And for some of you, you're in a place right now where there's a little bit more ideal than there is real, or you still have the potential of some of that ideal. Again, not perfect, but ideal in terms of this is some of what I prayed for, I aimed for, them dreaming of. A couple of things I'd say to you real quick. Don't miss now. Don't miss now. Meaning, and I'm talking to me too. Don't be so obsessed and looking for the future that you miss what's going on right now in your life. For some of you are in a place, and I would put myself in this category, in this particular season of life, that in previous years, this is what you prayed for. That this is what you were asking God to do. Don't get into a place where you are so future focused and so forward focused that you miss to enjoy today and you miss to enjoy right now. Do not miss now. I can't believe with you enough. Second thing, don't miss your marriage. I keep looking. There it is. Everybody, give them a hand back there. Thank you guys. Amazing. Jorge, Keith, appreciate you guys. Don't miss marriage. And I'm just going to go a little in your face, and I'll, as I say often, I'll exit out the back. I won't be out front today, but just real quick, don't miss. Guys, and I get this dynamic. Don't disguise your ego with, I'm just doing it for my family. I'm just doing it for my family. I only say that, and I get it. And depending, I think sometimes on your wiring, it can be harder for others. And you have been called to be progress-oriented, build stuff, grow stuff, move forward, be ambitious. That's part of the marks of the image of God on you. But I cannot tell you how many men that I sit down with who have so much regret over decades of disguising their ego as, I'm just doing it for the family. And they missed out. And they wish they could do anything to go back. And I don't say that to, kind of pile on anybody in this room, because there's so much opportunity. I guarantee you, there's so much opportunity in front of you, regardless of what's happened in the past. So from now on. But man, the earlier you can get this, don't miss marriage. And then I'm going to tread real lightly here, but ladies, women, don't confuse your husband with your father. because your husband cannot heal your father wounds. Don't ask him to. And I only bring that up because I see that, and people who, counselor friends of mine, it is such a massive dynamic in so many marriages. And so I'm moving on. I'll talk to the guys in a second. I don't mean to offend you. If I did offend you, get in line, but it's such a big deal. Third one, don't miss children. To quote a mentor of mine, do not trade what is unique to you for eventually what somebody else will do. Do not trade what is unique to you for what somebody else will eventually do. I am wired, I think, to move in this direction. I've said this before, so I won't tell the whole story, but I will never forget a kind of a defining moment where I came home and my little girl, who was not very old at all, was crying along with her mom, who was crying at the top of the stairs of our townhome after another 14-hour day and trying to build a church plant and all that went along with that. If you've ever tried to start anything, is extraordinarily time consuming. And I just recognized in that moment, if I don't tweak some things, I am going to miss the most important things in my life. Do not trade what is unique to you for what somebody else will do. Meaning there's always going to be a tension to manage, not a tension to solve, but one day what you're doing right now is going to be no more. You're going to retire. They're going to fire you. You're going to get phased out. The company was super successful, but then you sell it. And it is amazing how quick that happens. You get a gift card. Somebody gave you a watch. Nobody remembers anymore. Not to get too depressing, but this is the whole book of Ecclesiastes. And nobody's going to remember your name. Thanks for coming to church. I'm just telling you. And I'm not saying it's not a big deal. It is. Invest. What I do for a living, I love what I do. I love what I get the opportunity to do here, and some things I do outside of this that I'm so extraordinarily grateful for. I want to steward those well. I want to work hard, but it is not my life. It is not my identity. I only have two unique roles in this life, if you think about it. First, husband to my wife, hopefully last, but the one unique one is there's only one first. You only get one first. And dad to my kids. Everything else I'm doing in life, somebody else is going to do. I'll joke with our staff all the time. One day, I'm not going to be lead pastor anymore. People forget about me in 2 weeks, move on with their life. That's fine. That's just how the world works. I don't want to miss what's most important. I don't want to trade what is unique to me for something else somebody eventually is going to do anyway. Don't trade it. So real quick, rapid fire, don't miss dinner. I don't have a verse for this. I'm just giving you a couple things but don't miss dinner. Put the phones away. Create a space for them if you have to. Some of the best conversations happen over there. Don't miss forgiveness. One of the things we do in our home, we have 3 rules. That's it. And one of them is relational connection. That as much as you can, drive home the idea of it's all about relationship. Sin's a big deal because it severs relationship. Things that happen where you hurt somebody else, it's a big deal, not because of some arbitrary punishment, because of relationship. The worst punishment my kids face are when they've got to go get it right with somebody else. You got to use your allowance money. You got to go write a note. You got to look them in the eye because I want them to learn if you can learn to restore relationship, you're ahead of just about everybody in regard to relationship. So don't miss forgiveness. Teach it as much as you can. Don't substitute things for shared experiences. Renovate the kitchen later. Shared experiences if you're in that season of life. Don't compare. Get off social media if you have to. Just close it down. Stop comparing your journey to somebody else's that's not even reality. Don't keep score. For some of us, that is such a big deal. And you never experience the payoff right away. Just listen to me for a second. It always comes due in about 12 years. But man, you have trouble, whether it's with your kids, your adult kids, your marriage, some other relationships. You're just a scorekeeper. With as much love as I can muster, you need to get help. You need to get some counseling. You need to talk to somebody. Scorekeepers always suffer relationally. Do whatever you got to do. Don't resist help. One of the best decisions you can make over the next couple of weeks, and I've heard all the excuses in the world, and I've got them. Too busy, kids are busy, you got all this stuff, I can't get into a community group. You need community. And this whole idea in our culture, and I'll wind down a second because I think I'm over, but this whole idea in our culture that it's almost an idol of autonomy and independence, and I can carry it on my own and get in the driveway, get the driveway door up, get in there, shut it so I don't have to talk to anybody. And now there's this whole thing on Instagram where it's like, I don't really like people anyway, and the best day of my life is when you don't invite me to something, and everybody's annoying anyway. And it's funny, and it makes for a funny reel, but you're a follower of Jesus. And we've been called for community among difficult, messy, sometimes we don't even like them in the moment people. And we've also been called to find our tribe even when we're busy, because we cannot carry life on our own. One of the best decisions you can make for your marriage, for your kids, for your, the singleness, 20s, your college years, is to get into community with other people. And specifically, real quick, for guys, and I'll start to close this down. You need this so desperately. And it's so hard for us, but you are not Superman. Like, you're Batman, you need a Robin, you need at least an Alfred, maybe a Commissioner Gordon. You cannot, can you tell I have 3 boys? The only thing we obsess over is like, you need other people, and you need to get into relate. You are not designed to carry life and the weight of responsibility on your own. And we think we are, and we think we're doing somebody a service by just doing it and not telling anybody, and you can't do it. You need to find some men, not just with shared interests. You need to find some men with some shared values, or it's going to be tough on you. And then last thing, and I really will close this down, if you're in the place right now where you're experiencing a little more real than ideal, just a couple things. Don't miss your shot at reconciliation. The window's closing. It may not be possible, and I acknowledge that already, and I don't know your story. I acknowledge that already. Do everything you can. Obedience is a reward in itself. Do what you can and trust God with the outcomes. But if it's possible, don't miss your shot. The other thing is, don't miss what's next. For some of you, it's not what you aimed for. It's not what you prayed for. It's not what you dreamed for, at least in this season. Don't allow your grief to cause you to miss out on what you do have and what might be possible in ahead for you. And regardless of what's happened to this point, there is always, as far as it depends on me. So do what you can do. Don't miss that opportunity. Don't unnecessarily miss family if you can help it. And then the third thing is, don't miss who's next. I wish I could get every single Jesus follower to embrace this point right here. Don't miss who's next. Meaning, there is always somebody to serve and always somebody to love. For some of you, can I just get you to lean in for a second? Because some of you feel this. It's hard for me to talk about this without getting emotional, but you feel this because of your background experience. There's some kids whose family has missed ideal by a mile. And they need somebody to help them navigate what's real. And you know what that's like. You've had to experience that. You understand. This is why when I come on Wednesday nights, this last Wednesday night, we had I think, besides like our huge 2 events a year, largest student group ever, there was so many students here, a bunch of new leaders, and I got to walk around and meet some of them and have conversations. It always makes me emotional because these are busy people, by the way. So I get it, like, I'm busy. You have no idea what people who sit in circles with middle school students on Sundays or elementary or preschool, or then come to our student ministry on Wednesday night. You have no idea what some of these people are doing for a day job, or they're single moms, or all they got going on. And yet they have so determined it's worth the investment. And some of them have stories that they know are incredibly relevant for other kids whose family of origin has missed it. They've missed ideal by a mile, and they know what's that's like, and they're investing. And I would tell, for some of you, I would tell you that one of the ways that you ensure that your sorrow is not wasted is investing it. It's to do what Paul talked about in Corinthians. Actually, we have gone through things and we've experienced comfort so that we can give that off to other people. That's the way of Jesus. That's the way forward, regardless of where you're starting from. So, wherever that is, there is a next step. There is a way forward. Don't miss the opportunity, even if it's, at the end of the day, a clear conscience and no regret. And don't miss next week. Would you guys stand with me? Jesus, thank you what you're doing in this moment is I already recognize this hits 1,000 different directions. There's so many layers. There's so much complexity. There's just so many different stories. I don't know the stories. I don't know the complexity. I can't even imagine some of the situations represented, not just in these rooms today, but online. I just pray you'd meet them wherever they are, that you would give wisdom to know what to do, that you would give some of us the ability to continue to push toward ideal, to pray that over our kids or people that we are investing in and influencing, but we would never let go of real, that we would model the way of Jesus. But God, give us the wisdom to know what to do. Give us the courage to actually take steps today to do it. And for some of us, we literally need to take a step today. And we're just praying that you'll do what I could never do in a talk. We're praying for the Spirit of God to move and work in people's hearts. And we ask and pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.